We've got another big week of earnings ahead of us with the main two stocks that I will personally be watching because I hold shares of these companies. That'll be Palantir and HIMS stock. I'm going to focus most of this video on Palantir, but I'll chat just a little bit about HIMS because I do think there's one number in HIMS earnings that could be a make or break number as it relates to sentiment. I'll chat about that here in just a little while. If you're new here, I'm Austin. I'm a co-owner of cloudmusicweek.com. I'm also a stock market investor. And as I mentioned a second ago, I'm a shareholder of these two companies I'm talking about in this video, Palantir and HIMS. Much bigger shareholder of Palantir now that it's run so much and we're up more than 300% in multiple different accounts on the stock. It's actually my number one stock in my entire portfolio when you take all my accounts combined. HIMS is a much smaller position for me, but it's one I'm going to continue to grow, especially if we get any weakness in the stock price in the near term. We're up about 40% on HIMS right now, a little bit higher cost basis on that one than I would like. Real quick, if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. Click that subscribe button. Get us to that near-term goal of 5,000 subscribers. Drop a like on the video and consider checking out the Patreon by clicking the link in the description. All right, let's jump into the video. We're going to chat about Palantir first. Before I talk about what I expect from Palantir inside this quarter, things I want to see, things I'll be looking out for specifically. One, it's important to know they're reporting earnings Monday, November 4th after the market close. And I think there's a possibility that even if they come in with another record quarter and they hit all the things I want them to hit and everything's going perfectly, I think there's a possibility that the stock still goes down in the short term. And let me explain why. I want to look at a 5-day chart of Palantir. So over the last 5 days, we're down 6.95%, but almost all of that loss comes after AMD reported their earnings. AMD had a very strong earnings report. Pretty dang good guidance too. It was definitely a grade A quarter from AMD, but the stock was down like 10% and all AI names dropped along with it. So I'm curious if the AI trade is just going to chill out completely and it doesn't really matter what Palantir does, doesn't matter what Nvidia does. Is the market just going to sell these off? Because these AI companies, a lot of them are already priced to perfection. Palantir's PE is in like the 270 range. Forward PE is like 240. That's extremely high for a price to earnings ratio. Yes, Palantir is a special company. Yes, they have re-accelerating revenue growth. Yes, they have expanding margins. They are killing it. They're running the business absolutely amazing. They've got like 50+% US commercial growth. I get it. Amazing company. I hold shares of the company. It's my biggest position, but it is priced to perfection. So if this is not an absolutely perfect quarter, don't be surprised if the stock drops. And even if it is a perfect quarter, if the AI trade is done, then the AI trade is done for now. The stock might just chill for a little while. It might be dead money for a few quarters. But on the other side of that, I do think it's possible that Palantir reports such a ridiculous earnings this quarter that the stock goes up no matter what because it's undeniable. Just like Nvidia, we thought the Nvidia trade was over multiple times, or Wall Street said the Nvidia trade's over multiple times. And then they came out with earnings that were just like mind-blowingly ridiculous. If Palantir comes out with a quarter like that, yeah, it's probably going to keep going up, even if the AI trade as a whole is chilling out for now. And it's important to remember that those short-term movements really don't matter much at all if you're a long-term investor. I'm a long-term holder of Palantir. I've been in the stock for years now, gotten a great gain so far, but I think the gains we're going to see over the next 10 years, 15 years, are going to be much higher than this, and over time, this will be 1,000+% gainer for us. So although these short-term moves are interesting and they're fun to look at, they do not change the fundamentals of Palantir. The fundamentals of Palantir is what we need to continue to focus on as long-term shareholders. So let's talk about those fundamentals. Couple things I want to see inside this earnings. One thing I want to see is I actually want to see revenue growth exceed 30%. And I don't think this is a stretch, by the way. I want to read a sentence, a highlight from the Q2 earnings report. So in Q2, they had revenue growth of 27% year over year. That was 7% quarter over quarter, up to $678 million. But if we excluded strategic commercial contracts, they actually would have hit 30% year-over-year revenue growth and 10% quarter-over-quarter growth inside of Q2. So it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility for two reasons. One, they've been accelerating their revenue growth like crazy, all the way up from 12.75% up every single quarter over the last 6 quarters, and I think this one's going to be on that same trend. And like we said in Q2, we already saw them re-accelerate to that 30% number when you exclude those strategic commercial contracts. The next thing I want to see inside this earnings report is accelerating commercial growth outside of the US. Yes, this is the biggest market that they need to worry about. US is very, very important. Some of the strongest companies in the world are in the United States. I agree they should focus most of their efforts here. But if they can become more of a global player in the commercial space, I think that's only going to do good things for Palantir in the long term. And just to illustrate the stark difference in growth rates between the two, check it out. We've got total commercial revenue growth was up 33% in Q2, while US commercial revenue growth was up 55% in Q2. So that doesn't mean that the rest of the world is growing by 33%. The rest of the world commercial growth is much lower than 30%, and that 55% US commercial growth number is bringing that way up. So I'll be watching rest of the world commercial revenue growth numbers closely in Q3 and in Q4 of 2024. And just to get it out of the way, because it is very, very important, but it's a guarantee in my opinion, they are absolutely going to report another quarter of GAAP operating income being positive and GAAP net income being positive, with those margins growing. Last quarter, they had a 20% net income margin and they had a 16% GAAP operating margin. If we can increase those even just by 1%, 100 basis points on each one of those, 21% net income margin and 17% GAAP operating income margin, that'll be huge for Palantir. And I think it's important that they keep those margins expanding to keep the long-term investor very confident and secure about holding Palantir shares. And then the last thing I'll be watching really closely might sound a little weird, but I'll explain myself. So last quarter, they had 55% US commercial revenue growth year over year, which is an amazing number. But even better than that, they had 83% growth year over year in US commercial customer count. So that's a pretty stark difference between the two, almost 30% difference in the growth rate. I'd like to see those growth rates be more similar. And the reason I say that is because I want to see that Palantir can ink deals for the first time with a new company that are very large deals. I understand that generally they're going to get a slightly smaller deal first, and then they're going to prove that Palantir is a great product for that business. And then over time, they're going to increase their spend with Palantir over the next 5, 10, 20 years. That's the ideal situation for Palantir. But if every single customer they bring on in the US commercial side is signing really small deals, and then eventually they're getting to those big numbers aren't guaranteed. Not every company is guaranteed to stay with Palantir. So I'd like to see some big deals happening as their first deal with a new company. And that's obviously why this is different right now. If they're getting a lot more customers, 83% growth on the US commercial customer side, but they have 55% revenue growth, obviously the newer customers are spending less money. As financial conditions ease a little bit, I think companies are going to be more willing to actually spend more on their first deal with Palantir. So one, if we see that, it would be a good sign for the economy. And two, if we see that, that's a lot of trust that Palantir's brand is building. One CEO tells another CEO, hey, we're spending this much money on Palantir's product and it's saving us this much money. And whenever they build that trust from CEO to CEO, management team of huge company to management team of another huge company, there's a higher percentage chance that Palantir is going to get the bigger deal sooner, rather than like a starter deal that's a really small number and then slowly building up to those big contract values. Some of that is unavoidable, and overall, I think it's a really good thing for a company to start somewhat small and then to grow into larger and larger contract values with Palantir. But if we can get the size of the initial contract larger, that's going to do great things for Palantir's growth numbers. I was just about to move on and talk about HIMS stock, but there's actually one more thing that I'd be curious to hear Palantir's management team talk about by the end of 2024. But what I'd like to hear is what their plan is with their cash equivalents, and short-term investments that are sitting on the balance sheet right now. They have $4 billion of cash equivalents, and short-term investments, and I would bet that after Q3, what we see on Monday after the bell, that number is going to be even higher, maybe 4.1, 4.2, 4.3 billion dollars of cash equivalents, and short-term investments. Are they going to keep putting some of that money in T-bills to bring more net income to the company, some of that interest income, so it can bolster those profitability numbers? Or are they going to employ that money in a more useful way to grow the business? I want to hear about that. Or are they going to do buybacks? Are they going to pay a dividend? I don't think they should pay a dividend, by the way, right now. I really don't think they should do buybacks right now, but I want to hear what their plan is. Or are they just going to let that cash sit and kind of die in value? I'm okay with them putting it to work and getting some interest income off that, putting it in T-bills, etc. But I'd like to hear a plan for the $4+ billion of cash equivalents, and short-term investments that they've got on the balance sheet. Final thoughts on Palantir. It's going to be a banger quarter. They're probably going to beat on their expected numbers, and they're probably going to raise guidance. What happens to their stock price reaction? I really don't know. If it's a blow off the top quarter, we're probably going to move up. If it's an average quarter for Palantir, I would say we're probably going to move down based on what I saw with AMD. Okay, I don't care what happens. I'm holding my shares no matter what happens with Palantir's stock price movement, but it's interesting to look at, and it kind of gives you an idea of where the sentiment could be around Palantir for the next 3 months until their next earnings report. All right, the second stock I want to talk about is another stock that I own, and this is HIMS stock. HIMS and Hers Health, the ticker is HIMS. Just like Palantir, the stock has been on an absolutely amazing tear. One of the main reasons for this move is not only is HIMS just a crazy revenue growth company with very impressive gross margins, but they're also a profitable company now. When you flip the profitability corner and you've still got revenue growth of 52%, that's what they had in their last quarter. By the way, that's insane. The entire company has 52%. We're not talking about one business segment. We saw SoFi have one of their business segments in the 70% range. We just looked at Palantir. One of their business segments was 55% growth. This isn't one business segment. This is the whole company. 52% revenue growth. That's ridiculous. Not every company's out there growing at 52%, and definitely not every company out there that's profitable with their margins increasing is growing at 52%. That's a very special company. If you don't know what HIMS does, by the way, this is a telehealth company, and they just recently got into the weight loss injections like Wegovy, like Ozempic. They have their own GLP-1 injection, and this is what I want to talk about in this video. So to get it out of the way, I don't think this is going to be a bad quarter whatsoever at all. They'll have revenue growth exceeding 40%. They'll keep their gross margin at 81 or 82%. They're going to have a profitable quarter. It's going to be an amazing quarter, and they're probably going to raise their revenue guidance, and they're probably going to raise their profitability guidance. I don't think any of those things are going to be bad whatsoever at all. HIMS is going to deliver in Q3. Mark my words, you'll see after the bell on Monday. They're also reporting the same exact day, same time as Palantir, so it'll be an exciting Monday afternoon. But the one thing I want us to talk about real quick that I think could be noteworthy is I chatted about those GLP-1 injections. If we hear any weakness around the GLP-1 injection numbers, sales numbers, any litigation that might be happening, any hurdles they're having to jump through in order to get these to be available in this state or that state, or if there's any regulatory issues as a whole with their GLP-1 injections, we're probably going to see the stock price down in a big way. One of the main things that put a lot more momentum in HIMS sales and brought the stock price up was them offering those GLP-1 injections. So the main focus is going to be on those. Like I've said so many times, Wall Street likes to worry about the next 6 to 12 months. So if there's some stress around GLP-1 injection numbers for the next 6 to 12 months with HIMS, we're probably going to get Wall Street to sell the stock off massively. That said, if the GLP-1 stuff is going crazy, they're like, hey, it's better than expected, the stock price is probably going to move up in a major way, all right? That's going to be the main sentiment driver for HIMS, okay? If the stock price goes down in any meaningful way at all, I'm going to pick up a whole lot of shares. The stock price moved up too quickly for me to be able to build my position how I wanted to, so I really slowed down my purchase of HIMS stocks. Haven't bought the stock in a few weeks now, but I'd really like to increase my position. If we get any weakness in the stock price, I will definitely be picking up more shares, and I'll update you guys if I do end up pulling the trigger on a large block of shares after earnings. So those are the main two stocks I'm watching this week. Let me know in the comments below if you own either of those companies and if you believe that the stock prices are going to have positive reactions, positive earnings, or negative reactions with negative earnings. I'm curious to hear what you think and if you're going to be out there buying, selling, or you're just going to hold both these stocks. I want to hear about that in the comments below. Definitely one of my favorite parts of posting here on YouTube is checking out your comments, chatting with you guys down there, and seeing what you're doing out there in the market. Also, check out this graphic from Earnings Whispers. Shout out to Earnings Whispers. A lot of stocks are reporting this week. We're in the middle of earnings season. Not as big as last week for the overall market, but it might be a bigger week this week for you because it seems like a lot of those retail stocks are reporting earnings this week. I'm curious to hear about any stocks that you're going to be watching this week. I'll also check out those earnings. I'm always looking for new opportunities in the market. If you feel like you've got a great opportunity and a stock that's about to report banger earnings, I want to look at those earnings. I want to read that report. I want to check out those companies as well. Let me know in the comments. I appreciate you guys being here in a major way. Thank you so much. Have an amazing day.